All right, good morning guys. It's been a while since I've done a video. I like to do a bunch of them, but life's just busy. But right now I got a 4L80E all tore apart here. I got the case all washed up. This one's the late one. We always called it the 7-bolt bell or the LS bell housing, which I believe is 99 and up. It's also got a rear cooler line fitting you have to remove to get the gear train out of it. I got it all washed up. I got the Sonnax case bushing, the no-walk case bushing in there, which you actually have to sand off a little bit and modify for this washer to go in. So I got it all prepped up there. I got the new filter grommet in there, the new screen right there, got my wire harness in there, and I got a few things laid out here. We'll start with the gear train and I'll give you some tips on it. These things are usually barbecued because the torque converter has a piston that cracks and they lose lockup. And they'll have a P0894 code, a trans-component slipping code. In turn, the computer raises line pressure, so it makes the shifts hard until you cycle the key off. A lot of times these are in like express vans, work vans, and even though the transmission's functioning, the torque converter's not locking up, so these guys just drive them into the ground. They boil the fluid until the wire harness, the sensors just melt inside. It gets to like 280 degrees. So that's one of their biggest problems. This tranny I think started in 1991. There's earlier versions of it, quite a few updates. I'm a big fan of the Sonnax Sure Cure Kit. It's got a good amount of parts in there. I'll kind of show you as I put it together, and just another crash course. I'll show you what I can in 30 to 40 minutes. And not a big fan of transgo shift kits in them. They work okay, but I think they kind of sidestep a lot of issues where Sonnax kind of fixed the root cause problem and just improves the transmission and makes it better. So let's go. All right guys, gonna start putting the gear train together here. I start with the rear planet. As for any planetary, you wanna make sure that the washers aren't worn out so you can have a little bit of movement back and forth. Those washers can wear out. You don't want the pinion to rock though, to have any side to side kind of play. That means the pinion could be pitted inside. There's little needle bearings inside of them. So this one feels good. 4x4 units have no tone wheel on here because the output speed sensor's in the transfer case. So if you change this planet, you can have a tone wheel on there in a 4x4 and it doesn't matter. But if you put it in a 2-wheel drive without a tone wheel, it will not shift because it needs the output speed sensor there. So just be aware of that. Next, we grab our ring gear here. Later units have a shim that goes underneath the Torrington. Typically the 4 holes that are in the bottom let you know it's a late shaft. It also uses the lube grooves on the lube shaft in the bushings. They have little grooves in there for the lube. The earlier ones don't. So basically, get my assembly goo, start with the washer or the shim. Typically units that have no shim here have no snap ring below the center support, below this piece. So there's some interchange you can do once you get comfortable with them, but just be aware that they used it for a good amount of years, but things did change. Torrington bearings, again, you can make sure they're not pitted. You could reuse them or replace them if you want. Start with the bottom one. Those 3 hash marks let you know that this one uses the slots in the bushing, in the lube shaft bushings. So I glue that in there, glue that down, glue the other piece. This is how I've always assembled them. Other people might do it a different way, but put your ring gear down through the planet. You gotta have a hole in your bench. And basically take your rear Torrington, make sure it's not pitted up, it's in good shape. 3-piece bearing. Make sure it's lubed up, put that over the top. Then put your output in there. Once that's down, get your snap ring. Make sure it's clicked in all the way. Then you want to put your 4-tab washer on. Put a little bit of assembly grease on there. Keep it in place. I like to use 90 weight to lube stuff up, but I put a little bit of lube around the output shaft so it has something, to make it smooth where it goes over the rear seal and the bushing. Flip this over. You're gonna have another washer in here for the front planet. This plastic washer. Some assembly goo. There's some indexing tabs in there. So you can get that down. These units do eat up bushings, especially the older units, so there's a bushing in this front planet. You usually want to replace it, or you can also check it over the center support. Make sure it's nice and snug. Same with this one, make sure that the washers aren't worn on the planet. Want a nice, good, smooth surface here. Again, the low reverse band rides here. I got the low reverse band in the case. That's another issue with these, that guys, if they're towing things or backing up trailers on the 4x units, even the express vans backing up hills, they can smoke this band. So just want a nice smooth surface there. Put that planet on, and then you want to put your sprag on there. This one has the legs on it because there's no shim or washer down in the bottom. Like old Turbo 400s or early units, they have a big metal kind of a snap ring washer in there, and there's no legs on this. So this one uses the legs. Put that over. Rear sun gear, always inspect these. Make sure there's no hot marks or pitting. When these things plug the cooler up, they lose cooler flow and they just barbecue the sun gear and the planet. So that's the case, you got to replace it. These units can make a little noise in first gear when you take off until it goes to second. Pretty normal. They have a straight cut gear version, which was in like, 1 ton flatbed work vehicles, motorhomes. Stronger gear set, but they do make quite a bit more noise. On earlier units that have the 2 grooves here, you always had to line this hole up for the lube. This one, it doesn't matter with the slots on the bushing, but I still always line up this hole with one of the slots there. Just good practice for me. Put that in there. Then you have another Torrington bearing. Put the shim down, another bearing, and the other race. On the center support here, you got a washer that goes under the center support. Goes right here. It's kind of forgotten about when guys take it apart. It sticks in there and it goes through the wash. Then you have your other race. Take some assembly lube or goo, put it right there. I have already changed the bushing in this shaft, or in the center support. This is a later one. It's got the lube hole here on the bottom. The earlier ones in 400s, this is shorter and they don't have the lube hole there, so you got to put the right bushing in. I have the old bushing here, right here. So you can see they get chunks kind of come out of the bushing. You can see a line in there and you can catch your finger on it. So the lube shaft can get wobbly in there. This is a real critical bushing. When those bushings wear out, they start eating up the lands for the sealing rings here. And then you'll start seeing down here, it'll chew up and the sealing ring won't fit in there. And they usually will ruin the direct drum too. It'll get 4 grooves in there from the sealing rings you can catch your finger on. This one's cherry, it's really good. So I already got the new bushing in there. There's 4 new sealing rings. These you have to be careful with, they're really hard plastic. So I try not to pull them apart too far. Get them down at the bottom. I kind of rotate it for the openings, even though it's not a big deal. So I get my 4 new sealing rings on there. And then, got that good to go. Got my intermediate piston, got my 2 new lip seals on there. Grab my 90 weight. Give it a good coating on here. Just gonna paintbrush it on there. Then line up the spring marks in the center support. I have a good lip seal knife. This is like my old trusty one I've had for 20 years plus. These come in the kits. They work pretty good too on certain pistons. But typically just light pressure hold it. Actually start on the inside and just kind of finesse it and work it around. You can't muscle lip seals, then you'll tear them. And then you'll have a problem with second gear. This is the intermediate piston. So just like that, you kind of work it around. You just got to get the skirt past what it's going in. That goes down there. Basically needs your spring cage. This one you could probably work the snap ring on without a foot press. I have a good foot press, and then I've taken old pressure plates and sanded the tangs off the outside, and I might make nice little plates here. So when you put it in the foot press, you can push down on it and you don't bend the spring cage and make it look really bad there. So I take it over my foot press here. Pretty easy just to push down on it. Get that snap ring back in there. Oops. All right, so we got her down in there. And then I'll show you here before we put her back together. A couple other things. And be careful, my shim came off the bottom there, so. Okay, so you got that on there. Now you're ready to put it over the gear train. So now you're in place there. I take more lube over these sealing rings and I kind of brush around them. It's always good to lube this stuff up so that when you go to air check it, it can give you a good air check. Good practice on any sealing ring, lip seal. Okay, so this is what I do. I have a big C-clamp channel, or C-clamp vice grips here. I grab it like that, line up your bolt that goes in the case, your center support bolt. You lift it up, and then you drop it in the case. Found that's very easy to do. And then after that, you have your center support snap ring. It is beveled, so the bevel goes upward like this. You drop it in the case like that. And you also have, typically overhaul kits have a new bolt. You also, there's a hole through it where you air check it when you get your intermediate clutch in there. So we're gonna get this in the case and then we're gonna switch it up. So I'm gonna show you about putting the intermediate clutches in. I got my center support in there, got that bolt, the 3/8 12-point bolt in the case. You got your wave here, or cushion they call it, just to make the smooth shift into second gear. Those can break sometimes, so if there's a crack through it, replace it. Start with my steel plate, and then these take a high energy clutch. They're a little bit thinner, I think 10 thousandths thinner each than the earlier ones. There's 4 of them. So I just start loading them in the case there. Sorry for the video quality, but no pro. I think I could make some better videos if I got someone to film me here, but just trying to do a little crash course. So then you got your pressure plate goes down. One thing about these cases, these lugs can get broken out sometimes. If that's the case, then if it's like that, you got to scrap the case out. You can't have lugs broken out of the case. The snap ring for this, I always put the opening right here over by the band lug. I've seen the factory do it the opposite way, but probably not a big deal, but I like it just like that. Opening over here, I could probably readjust it a little bit. So then I take my air blower, hit that center support bolt hole, air check it, which checks good. This clutch is actually typically sloppy from the factory. You could put a thicker steel in there from like a Turbo 400 to take out a little clearance, or a thicker clutch. Tried it both ways, so won't hurt either way. So you could tighten it up just a little bit. Next, I take my second gear manual second band, the little lug there that goes in the case. You can also take a pick through here and then make sure it activates. So you kind of want it outward so that you can get the direct drum in there next. So now we're going to assemble the direct drum and the forward drum. Show you a little something on there. Intermediate sprag, this one-way clutch, those can have issues. This is the high element one. 400s had less elements. You got a washer that goes on here, your sprag, and it has to rotate correctly. This one turns to the right. So if you're looking over it, it should turn to the right. And then you have another washer and that piece, and then you have a spiral lock snap ring, which is pretty nice. So you kind of work that over, make sure it goes into place. Sometimes it doesn't want to click in all the way, but there you go. So you got it on there, turns to the right, flip it over. There's a lip seal that goes in here with the skirt going upward. So make sure you get that in there. Next, you want to get your bonded piston. Now, earlier 4L80Es, they have aluminum pistons in them. Typically, we go to these bonded steel ones. You just have to be aware, same in a Turbo 400, there has to be a bleed hole here, check ball, to bleed out feed oil. And like a 400, if there's no bleed hole here and nothing in the piston, because some of the aluminum pistons had it, you'll have a major problem where it can't vent oil. So bonded piston, I like to put a little bit of grease on the inside of these. Some of these can be kind of a pain to put in. That's where this lip wizard from Transtech can come in handy, or your lip seal knife. But typically lube everything up as normal. And then a lot of times you can take these and just twist. So I got it in. It's in all the way. It's your spring cage. And then your snap ring. This one, I just go right to the foot press. If you don't have a foot press, some of this can be pretty hard to do. I've seen some bench style presses you can get. But a real foot press is worth the investment if you're doing more transmissions. So got that in there. The early 4L80Es and Turbo 400s, the wave plates they used were kind of a round one with two tangs. They were known to break. These are the good wave plates. They either have 6 tangs or 12 tangs. These are the ones you want, although sometimes if you're converting the early stuff, you got to check your clearances. So you start with the wave. These direct drums use, I believe it's 90 thousandths. They have the thicker steels. Let's see. I think I got these mixed up. Those are my forwards. These are the ones I hung up. Okay, these are my direct ones. See, this one's got the 12 tangs. You can use either one. Put that in there. They use the thicker steels that are 90 thousandths. The forward clutch drum, the one we'll do next, those use, it's like 75 thousandths. So if you get the right steels in there, it stacks up really good. I got Borg-Warner Energy clutches. These work really good. So basically 5 steels, 5 clutches. These steels are just in great shape. If they have burn marks on them or, you know, big heat glaze over them, you want to replace them. Okay, so a good rule on these, when you get to the top, you can see right here when the clearance is good, this clutch is just below this line right here. So you can see right there, it's just below it. So that's great clearance. What you can also do is get your pressure plate in there. And again, I don't have the book in front of me for the exact spec, but I've done this many times, so you can go by feel. It's good to put the snap ring in, smack it on the bench, take your pick, and then you can lift up on the bottom clutch. And you can see that's probably 30 to 40 thousandths. Great clearance. So what I do when I put these together, you could just set this in the case and then build your clutches into it. Have a nice tool an old builder made for me. I put this snap ring part way in, then I can lift this up and then work it into the intermediate clutches. See, and once you're down all the way, you can hear it make a good sound. Lift up on it. Make sure it's solid and down all the way. Big thing about assembling transmissions, especially if you're kind of new to it, You really want to make sure everything's down all the way. A lot of times people don't get like the last clutch in there or spline down, and they try to bolt it together and it just binds everything up, nothing spins. Okay, so I got my pressure plate snap ring in there. We're gonna go to the forward drum. This is a later one, so it's got the bonded lip seal in here, which this is replaceable. If it's soft, you don't need to, it's not torn. You can take some heel bars and pry this out of here. Again, you see the bleed hole, feed and bleed there. It's always good to look right through here and check these sealing ring lands from your input shaft. A lot of times this can wear, these rings wear, and then you'll have some big grooves in the forward drum. So if that's the case, not good. Also want to check or replace this bushing here for your overdrive planet. So, got that ready. Same thing with my forward piston. Make sure you have either a new piston or these lip seals are very soft, nothing's torn. Lube the inside up. I lube also the lip seal, that bonded seal right there. Same thing here. And then usually you can almost twist these in place. Yep. So that one's in there. If not, lip seal knife or the Trans-Tech tool. Same thing, grab your spring cage. It's the same spring cage, forward or direct. They interchange. Grab your snap ring. Foot press. You're in. Okay, forward steels. Remember wave plate? The wave plate makes for a smooth apply when it goes into gear, so it's not real clunky. You'll see on like old transmissions like 350s and 400s, when guys would shift kit them, they'd leave wave plates out or add another steel to get the right clearance. Clearance is critical. You don't want that piston to overstroke and tear the skirts on it. Again, Borg-Warner high energy clutches. Raybestos makes good clutches too, so does Exetti. Alto's pretty good. There's a lot of brands out there, but Raybestos, Borg-Warner, probably the best. Okay, same here with this one. When it's clearance right, you can see the clutch is just below the bottom edge of where the pressure plate goes. So you can see that's perfect. Then this one has a hub here. Now we built a good amount of these for LS swaps, the guys that have like 500 horse or more. They do make a billet input shaft and a billet forward clutch hub. I believe it's from Sonnax. Good option, just if extra horsepower, extra insurance. Another upgrade here, this is actually in the Sure Cure Kit. From the factory, this washer on the other side of this hub's plastic. Throw it away. We have a nice brass one from Sonnax. Put that over this. And work it on through the tangs of the clutches. Then you got your pressure plate. That's also the clutch hub for the directs. Snap ring. It's in place. Tell it's got clearance. Then you got your Torrington bearing for the overdrive planet goes here. I like to put a little bit of grease down in here for the sealing ring lands. And then basically you grab this and then you got to work it down over the direct drum until it bottoms out. So, I'm going to turn this way a little bit. So you can see I'm trying to get it through the tangs of the clutches. There, all the way down. Usually it's not that big of a fight, but when you're down, you can lift up a hair until it's all the way down. You can also look through your speed sensor hole and make sure the tone wheel for the input speed sensor is the forward drum there. Okay, so that's going to bring us to your overdrive piston housing. This one I've already got together. This can be a pain in the ass to put together. We have, when you take the snap ring off and the spring cage, there's 2 lip seals in here for the overdrive clutches, which are the big ones that go inside of it. What's easiest to do, if you take it apart, this inner piece, you have to take and stand a lead chamfer around it to get the lip seals down. We have a tool here, old Kentmore tool, where you can put it up on here, and then there's this piece will go up and collapse the lip seal on the bottom. Then the upper one, you usually have to work in with your lip seal knife, but you got to put a chamfer on that piston where it's very hard to get in. And then there's a tool here to put it in an arbor press and then get your snap ring in. So I'll give you a little tip, you know, depending how old the unit is, how bad it is. If the overdrive clutches are great, you can keep it together. Sometimes might be the easiest if you're just learning or patching something together if you don't have the tool, but usually those lip seals are pretty soft, but it's best to replace them, of course, but depending what you're doing and if the clutch isn't compromised, it's up to you. So you got to line up, there's the hole, the center support bolt, the 40 Torx. That goes in the front of the case where the valve body goes down. So I lay that in there. Then most kits have a new bolt and there's a hole through it. That's where you air check the overdrive clutch. Get your 40 Torx. For now, you're just starting the bolt. And then once I get my pump tight, then I tighten that bolt just so everything's settled. And now we're gonna move on to the coast clutch drum and the input shaft, so I can show you about replacing the sealing rings there. So right here, I'm just gonna get the old sealing rings off. Use a pick, but don't stab yourself. Usually before I start really assembling these transmissions, I'll have the new sealing rings on the input shaft with the sizing tool over it, so they can kind of size up while I'm doing other things. These sealing rings are kind of a pain. If the weather's cold and you're trying to put them on, they're known to just break. So it's good to like warm them up in your hands or kind of breathe on them, get them nice and soft. We have some installing tools here, but really I just use the sizers for it. And I've found what's easiest for me is I take my snap ring pliers and I just lightly work them out just a little bit, not too much, just kind of open them up a little bit. And then I take my pick and I work them over the shaft. You just got to be careful because then they'll break. And then if you're not at a tranny shop, you're looking for a sealing ring, or you got to go down to a tranny shop and buy one, see if they'll give you one. And then they'll kind of look at you like, why are you building your transmission in your garage? And hopefully you don't bring it back in another week in a box. So this might look easy, but it takes many years to get good at it. And it's still hard. You still get kicked in the nuts every day when you build transmissions. So just like that, I worked them over. I'm gonna take my fingers and kind of press them back in, try to get them back in the groove a little better so they're not hanging out. And then lube up the rings. And then I use this sizer here. It's got a chamfer on it. Kind of work them over it. Gotta be careful because they still don't want to go down all the way. Just like that. And it's just a ring sizer, they call it. You make a lot of those tools for all transmissions. So these ones are even more sensitive. They're pretty thick. So I just open them up just a little bit. Just lightly. And I hold one side of it and I use my pick. Oop. And I try to work them over. Just like that. Sometimes you get a little shard come off of it, that's okay. Just use your fingers, try to work them down. Get the first one down. Sometimes they want to twist on you. but they're pretty pliable, so you try to work them back in their grooves once they're on there. So we have these installer tools too that can kind of go over it, and you can slide them over, but sometimes it expands it too much and they rip, or they'll break and tear. But I've found this works for me. Just like in any shop, everyone has an opinion how to do it, but nobody has an answer. So they always tell you, oh, this is what I do, and then they walk away. So I have found this is what works for me. All right, same thing. Lube those up. Take your ring sizer. Just work them on there nice and easy. Bottom one can be kind of a pain sometimes. Use your fingernail. Try to push it back in. Just like that. So I usually set this off to the side, let those rings kind of size up, and work on other things till I'm ready for it. Right here, coast clutch drum. These teeth are known to pit pretty bad. A lot of times you can still use them if there isn't, you know, too bad of divots in them. They're very strong. The better ones to use are the early ones, which I believe is like 98 and older. They use this bigger black sprag. You can convert, you can use an early one or a late one in either unit, as long as you have the planet matched with the spring cage and the snap ring. The snap ring groove is different and the snap ring's different, and also the spring cage is different. That holds it into place. So just be aware of that if you're swapping this stuff. You want to match set together. Same thing, this piston, the coast piston, make sure you replace it, or the lips are extremely soft on it. Never need a tool for this. You just kind of twist it into place once you get it in there. One sec. Put a little grease down in this one just for good measure. Okay. And then you'll get your cage in here. Make sure you get your snap ring on it. This one uses the big thick snap ring. On the earlier setup, the later ones, it's a thinner snap ring, and there's 2 grooves down in there on the later ones. You make sure you get it in the lower groove. And then take a little breather here and go on to the next step. Okay, so we're back at it. We got the cage in there, the snap ring. You can see the groove down there to get the snap ring in. And then overdrive sprag. Make sure all the springs and rollers are in it. It was just like that. Then you got to do your steels and clutches. Coast clutch, just like that. There's 3 of each. You got to put these in, and then you can put the planet in. Pressure plate here, it does say up on it, so it only goes one way. Big snap ring. Make sure you get it in there right. Okay, check your clearance. And always, overdrive planet, same thing. Check for too much movement. These are pretty strong typically. You can feel the Torrington bearing down in there. It's captured, but try to feel it. Make sure it doesn't feel rough. Put a little bit of lube on there. And then you gotta work this over the clutches. Boom, you're down. Lift up a little bit and go down. You can tell it's solid. Next step, snap ring pliers. You get your input shaft snap ring. Then I'll take this one off, go over it, just like that. And then you need to put this eyelet snap ring on. Just like that. Then I'll put my sizer back over it. And then usually what I'll do, take the sizer off, drop it in the case. So that's in there. I'll leave the top sizer on while I'm doing other things till I get the pump ready. What you can also do next too, get your overdrive clutches on there. So always very satisfying to put your clutches in. So take this off and get the camera over here. So you got 4 steels, 4 clutches. There's a little V-tab in it right there. That always goes here at the top of the case, right there. And then we grab our clutches. Again, get that little V-tab up there at the top, right at 12 o'clock. Just like that. Oop. Sometimes you gotta watch the coast drum here if any of these splines get kind of damaged from prior clutch failures. Just like that. This is the later overdrive pressure plate. The earlier ones look a little different than that. But then you'll get your pressure plate in there, then your snap ring. So this snap ring's pretty stout, but what I'll tell you is it's good once it's popped in there. Take your screwdriver, make sure it's in the groove all the way, because it can pop out of there. So make sure that's in all the way. Grab your air blower, blow through that 40 Torx bolt, air checking the overdrive clutch. And then I've made these little dowels where you can thread them over. Basically just take bolts and cut the heads off. And then I kind of ground the ends down so you can spin them with your fingers. You'll want to get your pump gasket on there. So we got it over here in our kit. So pump gasket, don't forget that. Now one other thing that's a big mistake when people build these is right here, this case is a 2004. Now on the ones before it, there isn't a boss right there. See if I can get the camera right in there. So on the older ones, right here, there's no boss in the case there, it's wide open. They had 2 different pumps, and I believe it was around 03, 04 they changed. So you have to look at your pump and match it to the case. If you try to change a pump and it's the wrong one, it will work for, I don't know, I think 30, 40, 50 miles. And then it will just melt down the overdrive or coast clutch, weld it together. So you got to make sure that you have the match pump to the case. It's a big mistake. Even good builders have done it a few times. I did when I was younger. It happens. I'm still very, very critical on this, and I always double check, triple check. So you can see this one right here. It's got the other hole here, and there's a cut plug there, but it's got the case here to blind this hole off. If you put this pump in a case that doesn't have a blind piece of aluminum there, it's just going to dump oil. So you got to match these up. Even the part number can be the same, but it can be different here. Extremely critical. So if you're mixing and matching stuff, just because it looks the same and it's the same part number doesn't mean it's the same. So just want you guys to be aware of that. That's very critical. Pump gears, you always want to inspect your pump gears, make sure they're not all scratched up. Check the inside, make sure the slots that go in the converter are okay. Make sure nobody prior tried to kind of stack it and damage the pump gear. Then your pump, you want to look at the crescent right here. Make sure there's no big wear where you can hang your fingernail up on it. If so, you'd want to replace the pump body. Bushing, if you replace it, make sure you stake it in there. Just a couple more critical things. So I'm going to jump here to the next step. So we're to the pump. I got the new front seal in the pump, the bushing. The pump gear, you see it's flat here, and then you'll see indexes here where it goes to the converter. So that goes towards the converter. That'll go straight down in there. You got to put it in the right way. Always lube your pump gears up with a lot of pre-lube so it doesn't have a dry fire and burn it up. Pump stator here from Sonnax, they have a wide front stator bushing, which we got one in here. Really nice upgrade. Another upgrade they have Well, actually first I always check these valves, make sure they're free. That one there, that one there. And then your main pressure regulator valve, they have a good reverse boost valve with O-rings on it. Also where you change the end plug and put an O-ring one on there just to keep pressure from leaking. Once your valve's in, you got your big spring, bumper spring, and a washer. And then you want to take and lube up these O-rings. And then I use some 90 weight. And then you want to drop it back in there. Kind of tight with the O-rings. Get your snap ring. Just like that. Make sure your snap ring's back in all the way. And then you'll want to line up your pump halves. And if you don't have a pump alignment tool, this could be kind of hard to get it correctly, but I'm gonna grab it right now. We got a good pump alignment tool. This one's kind of universal for most transmissions. You can put which number it is for 4L80s on there. And then I always bring it down a little bit low, and then I lift up on it, and then I kind of go work it all the way around. And then you can also look down in there and make sure your pump bolt holes are all kind of lined up to the case. And then you got your 13 mils. You could torque these if you want, or if you've done a bunch of them, kind of know the torque. So with your gun, take that off. Get your new pump O-ring on there. Work it around. I got my pump washer on here, my 2 new sealing rings. You can also change the rear stator bushing. If you have an H gauge, it's a tool to check your clearance, so you can set it up here and then flip it over in the case and make sure you have good in clearance before putting it in there. Always lube these up. Lube that bushing. Put a little bit of grease down in there for the sealing rings. Spin this around, lube up your O-ring, and then ready to put it in the case. Take your other ring sizer off. Sometimes just gotta give it a little. Just a little tap. She's down. And what I always like to do is once you get the pump down, the first thing I do, I always like to put my lockup O-ring on the input shaft. I've seen guys wait to do this at the very end and forget it. So you want to put that O-ring in there. Real critical. And now one thing you could do, I call it going the extra mile because some builders are lazy. All your pump bolts, they have a nice thick grommet washer on it, or seal. Replace all of those. They get worn out and flat. They can leak through the pump bolts. Just anything you can do to forget about or not have a comeback. So really critical there. Other than that, I'm just going to show you a couple things here just because I want to wrap it up for you. So on the case, once you get the pump bolts in there, you can tip it downward. You see I got the O-ring on there. Tip your case downward. You'll build your reverse servo piston. Same thing, you can air check it there and make sure it's actually turning, turning the planet a little bit when you hit it with air. You can also air check your forward and direct clutches. Put in your intermediate band servo. Basically, for your second gear band, there's a sealing ring on there. It takes 8 check balls too. The Sure Cure Kit has plastic balls. You'll also tighten that too once you're done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No ball goes right there, even though there's a little spot for it. No ball goes there. Another thing to be aware about on your reverse servo, sometimes these can crack. See them in like plow Put your 2 new rubber seals on here. One thing to be aware about in the kit that's I've seen good builders overlook is, let me grab them out of here. So these are your accumulator pistons for the valve body right here, and then this is your 1-2 accumulator piston. In your kit, there's 3 of these rubber D-rings that look the same, but you got to hold them up next to each other. One's a little bit bigger, and that actually goes right here on the intermediate for the 1-2. And then you also get another rubber one here. Work it on there, make sure it doesn't roll. So just really critical to make sure you get those correct. Another great thing about the Sure Cure kit, they have some new shift springs. Let's see here, let me grab the valve body. Love to spend more time, but I gotta cut it short here. So there's 2 new shift springs. There's instructions in the kit, or all their instructions are online. New springs for behind the different shift valves. There's also a screen in here you want to replace. You take the roll pin out and knock it out with a screwdriver. New screen. Then you have another new screen right here. And this lockup valve, there's instructions about it. It's good to replace this. There's a Teflon ring on it. There's your plastic check balls. Get rid of the metal ones. The AFL valve, this is another good update. You need a reamer though to do it from Sonnax. But you have to ream out this bore. I believe Transgo might have a drop-in version. And you also have to drill 1 little hole in the separator plate, the balance feed hole, which is that little one right there. So just be aware, the instructions aren't in all their new stuff. A lot of it's online. So just big upgrades. It's good to replace the shift solenoids. You can replace all the solenoids. We're able to test like the lockup and the pressure control solenoid. But shift solenoids are a must, especially on the early units. Pressure switch manifold you can replace. Other than that, it's about 13 to 14 quarts of fluid. I'm not going to show the valve body assembly, but it's pretty straightforward. I use a couple dowels to align the separator plate when I bolt the accumulators on there. They also make a nice kit too that you can get that bolts in here to keep this connector from popping into the case. And again, just kind of a little crash course. So I hope you guys liked it, and I hope to do some more videos, and hit the like button. Thank you.